Here we have a 2003 Vauxhall Corsa. The air conditioning is not working. It's not been working for a couple of years now, so I'm going to take a look and see if I can find out what's wrong with it. It's just warm air blowing through the vents. Nothing happening. When I switched the air conditioning on, I could see that the compressor clutch was not engaging and rotating as it's supposed to. So that could indicate some electrical fault, or possibly if there's no pressure in the system, then that would stop it engaging as well. This is a regassing kit that I bought from Halfords, and the low pressure port on a Corsa is just there, so we will connect that and see what the pressure is like. We've got loads of pressure there. What you would normally expect to happen when you start the engine is that if it's working correctly, that will drop down into the green zone, but since the clutch is not operating, I don't expect that to happen. With the engine running, there's no difference on the pressure gauge as expected. The electrical connector for the compressor is down here. I've exposed the electrical connector for the Aircon clutch, and I'm now going to test whether we've got a good signal. At the moment the engine's not running, and we won't get a signal until the engine is actually switched on and running. The aircon is turned on, but the engine isn't, so we would see 0 volts if we were to probe it. So I'll switch the engine on. We'll test to see whether we've got a good signal. Okay, 14.5 quarter volts. Nothing. 0. Okay, so what I did there was check that there were volts when the engine was running with the aircon switched on, and there were 14 volts. And with the aircon switched off, that dropped down to 0. So that indicates that the electrical circuits are working fine, and it must be the magnetic clutch itself that's broken. Here is a replacement magnetic clutch which I bought on eBay. It actually says that it doesn't fit this vehicle, but I think that's just a mistake because it's lacking a bracket on the cable, just to make sure that it doesn't get tangled up in the electrics. It's certainly the right diameter inside, outside and inside, and here, and it has a location pip here, which is correct. And it appears to be the right connector type as well. So we will fit it and see whether it works okay. But to do that, I'll need to get the car up on axle stands. A word about testing these magnetic clutches. Basically what you have is a coil which is low resistance, of the order of 4 ohms or so, and in parallel with that, a diode which catches the back EMF when the coil switches off. So we can test whether the coil's good or not. If it's good, it will read 4 ohms in both directions. If it's faulty and it's the coil that's failed, then you should just be able to see the diode with a meter. So if we switch the meter around to the diode test position and measure across the terminals, we get 626 millivolts, which is what you normally see for a diode in one direction. In the other direction, open circuit, so we're not seeing the 4 ohms, therefore this clutch is definitely faulty. If we try the new one, which I've bought to replace it, and we try the same trick, we see well, 4 millivolts, so very low in that direction, and very low in that direction as well. So that's as you would expect, that's the brand new part, and it's reading low in both directions. One thing to make note is make sure that the replacement part has the correct orientation of connectors to the part that's coming off. So this has got the brown wire, which is live on the left hand side, and the you can see the shape of the cutout, that the large tab is on the top and there's a large cutout on the bottom. Okay, the car's now supported on axle stands. In order to work on the compressor clutch, we need to get the accessory belt off, and the easiest way to do this is to remove this bracket to give access. We may need to remove some bodywork from underneath the car to give access as well, we'll see. So the engine will need supporting by a trolley jack, so I'll get that fitted next and remove that bracket. Now the engine's supported on the trolley jack, we can remove the bracket. So there are 5 11mm bolts, those 2, one there, and then there's one right underneath. So we'll start with these 2, and if the trolley jack is positioned correctly, they will support the engine and it shouldn't drop. So that's one. The engine does seem to be dropping a bit, so I think I'll give it a bit more, lift it up a bit. Okay, carry on. The bracket's released, but can't get it out, unfortunately. This is in the way, so I'll have to undo 2 bolts either side of there to get rid of this metal piece, and then it should withdraw okay. Okay, 2 bolts removed from here, so we can withdraw that. And now we can take this out. The next job is to get the accessory belt off. Now this requires pulling back the tensioner. This needs a 14mm socket and a long bar, because you need a lot of force to be able to get that tensioner to move. Yeah, make sure the engine is well supported. You're going to be applying a lot of force to it, to that socket, to get it to move. Okay, that's the accessory belt removed. I found it was easiest to slip it off the large pulley at the top here. So we just get that out of the way. Yep, now we're ready to start on the actual clutch itself. The next job is to get the clutch plate off, which because it's connected to the compressor, just turns. It's held on by a T30 Torx headed screw, but of course when you try and apply some pressure, the whole thing rotates, so you need something to hold the clutch plate. I've seen other videos where people bash this with a hammer. I don't recommend that. I've got a much gentler way of dealing with that. Use a oil filter remover to grip the clutch plate. Okay, that's the chain wrench in position, yep, so just undo the nut, the bolt. It's only it's held in with thread lock, so you'll need some of that when you reassemble it. Okay, here's the clutch. Right, down in there there's a washer. Now that's quite critical. It sets the clutch distance so that it bites properly. Make sure that you don't lose those. Obviously this one's a bit rusty because it's not been active for 2 years. Next to come off is the pulley. Now that's held on by a circlip like this one, so I bought myself some cheap circlip pliers off eBay. They were only a £5, so now we've got to try and find where those little holes are, and then spread it apart and try and remove it. This is a bit fiddly. Also down in there you can see that white thing, that's a lubrication pad, so we need to remove that and retain that for future use. Okay, well that was easier than I thought. It's actually seemed to be down that way with the pins at the bottom, so it's relatively easy to get to. So now we should just be able to slide the pulley off. Yep, there we go. Okay, so there we have the pulley. Next to come off is the electromagnetic clutch itself. That is also held on by a circlip. It's one like this, much bigger. Problem with this is the holes are spaced quite far apart, so the standard jaws you get with the circlip plier aren't wide enough, so there's some spares in the kit. So what I've done is adapted them, spread them out a bit, so that should allow me to remove the circlip and get the clutch off. Before we do remove the clutch, we need to get the electrical connector off. So it's a T20 bolt, so just undo that. I managed to get the circlip off. It's a bit of a struggle. You can't see what you're doing, and it's difficult to get a mirror down there because of the constricted space. Basically what I did was feel around for the holes with the ends of the circlip pliers, and when I thought I'd got them, I just compressed the tool, and yeah, it just, after 3 or 4 attempts, it popped off. The clutch now should be free, and we can just take it out. Yep. Here's the clutch that came out of the car, and this is the new one. The connectors are the same. Yep. The only difference is this bracket here. So I'm going to remove this one, clean it up, and fit it to this one. That's the bracket cleaned up and installed on the new connector. I was going to crimp it to the cable, but I think with this replacement the diode is actually in the wiring here, so That's probably not a good idea to put any crimps along here. It might damage it. Time to refit the new clutch. That should just go on there. Oh, perfect. Make sure it is locked with that locating pin. And then the next thing is to attach the circlip. So with this, what you need to do is really squeeze it to open it out so that you can get it on to the clutch. It's a little bit fiddly, I have to say, but yeah, 3 or 4 attempts and you might do it. And we'll try applying it. That's the new clutch installed, and I've also fitted the electrical connector down there, that little torque screw there. Now, despite the fact that the cable doesn't go into that little slot there, it does seem to be out of the way. If I put the, there we go. So that seems to rotate and doesn't seem to be in the way of the cable, so that's great. Now just need to get the circlip onto this one. This is a smaller one, so it should be a bit easier, and it's closer to the end, so you might be able to see what I'm doing. Use a mirror to check that the circlips are positioned in the right place. Yeah, that wasn't quite right, but it looks good now. There's equal on both sides of the holes are, you can see a bit of metal showing through the holes on both sides. Time to refit the clutch. Make sure that the washers are still in position. I've cleaned the threads on the screw, and I'll apply some new thread lock to the ends of that to hold it in place. The tool we need is the T30 bit on a wrench and chain wrench as well to hold the clutch in place. That's the clutch plate back on with thread lock applied to the Torx bolt, and the chain wrench again used to hold the clutch plate so that the bolt could be done up. That's the accessory belt all reattached. Again, I've found slipping it over the top pulley was the easiest. That's the engine bracket reattached. All we need to do now is fit the anti-vibration mount. The car's all back together now. Let's turn the engine on and make sure that the accessory belt's okay. Yep, that's all looks fine. Now we'll switch on the air conditioning and see whether the clutch engages. Yep, I think we can see that spinning now, so that's pretty good. Looks like we've fixed it. Yeah, that seems to be coming out cold now. Okay, excellent. I'll just do a pressure check now. Engine's off at the moment and it's reading high pressure, so hopefully it will drop when I turn the engine on. Okay, that dropped down to the green zone, so despite the fact that this car's not been using its aircon for 2 years, the pressure is fine, doesn't need regassing at all. These are the tools that I've used to do this fix. So a couple of axle stands, a trolley jack to support the engine. I've used a block of wood since I'm bearing directly onto the sump of the engine. Then first we have 11mm spanner or socket set to take off the engine mounting bracket and anti-vibration mount. Then 14mm socket to release the tension on the auxiliary belt tensioner, and we need a long bar for that. Got to apply quite a bit of force. Then we start work on the compressor itself. So T30 Torx bit on a wrench, and a chain wrench to grip the clutch plate. Then once we've got that off, we need to get the rest of the clutch parts off. So circlip pliers with normal head and one that I've adapted to make it wider. It's useful to have a mirror so you can see what you're doing in that very confined space, although you can't. I found it difficult to use that and the pliers at the same time. Once you've got everything off, you need a T20 Torx bit to release the bracket that holds the electrical cable. So that's it. And finally, we've got some thread locker which you'll need to apply to the T30 hex bolt when the clutch plate is put back on. So that's it. Whole project has only cost £20 for the new electromagnetic clutch.